Ethan had never imagined his life would be anything other than ordinary. He lived on a quiet space station far from Earth, doing routine maintenance jobs for the intergalactic network. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful, and that was exactly what he wanted. His days were spent fixing machines and tending to the station's needs. He liked it that way, no distractions, no surprises. But all of that was about to change in a way he could never have prepared for. One calm afternoon, the station's communications officer, Lena, received an unusual distress signal. It was faint, barely audible, but the coordinates were clear. The signal came from a damaged ship drifting dangerously close to the station. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. Ships broke down all the time in deep space, and it was usually no big deal. But this was different. The message was urgent, and the ship appeared to be in trouble. Ethan was called to assist. As his skills with mechanical repairs were needed, he grabbed his toolkit and made his way to the docking bay. As the doors of the hangar slid open, he was taken aback by what he saw. The ship was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was sleek and elegant, with shimmering silver plating that seemed to change color in the light. The vessel looked ancient, yet it had a strange modernity to it. Ethan had read about alien ships in the manuals, but seeing one up close was something else entirely. He boarded the ship cautiously, looking for any signs of life. Inside, the air was stale, and the lights flickered. The hallway stretched out ahead, the walls lined with strange, intricate designs. As Ethan walked through the corridors, he heard soft noises coming from what seemed like a distant room. He followed the sounds, his curiosity piquing. When he reached the door, it slid open automatically, revealing a small chamber. In the center of the room stood an alien queen, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. She was tall, her skin a pale shade of blue that shimmered in the dim light. Her eyes were a deep, glowing purple, and her hair was long and silver, cascading down her back like liquid metal. She was beautiful in a way that Ethan couldn't quite describe, her presence commanding and regal. But it was her expression that caught him off guard. Desperation and concern were visible in her eyes. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had expected to find an injured crew member or maybe a stranded alien, but this was a queen, and she looked as if she had been waiting for him. "Please, human," she said in a voice that was both melodic and firm. "I need your help." Ethan blinked, still processing the fact that an alien queen was speaking to him. "Help! How can I?" Before he could finish, a small cry echoed through the room. Ethan turned his head to see a tiny creature nestled in the queen's arms. It looked like a baby, an alien baby, with soft green skin and wide eyes, but it was crying loudly, its tiny face scrunched up in distress. The queen's expression faltered, and she turned to Ethan. "Please," she said again, her voice softer this time. "My child, he will not stop crying. I've tried everything, but nothing works. I need you to calm him." Ethan stood frozen in place. He wasn't sure what to make of this. How could he possibly help? He had no experience with alien children, let alone the queen's child. But the desperation in her eyes was impossible to ignore. "How am I supposed to?" he started, but his words trailed off as he saw the queen gently rock the baby, her face full of worry. Ethan, still unsure, took a hesitant step forward. The baby's cries grew louder, and the sound was starting to feel overwhelming. He instinctively reached out, his hand hovering over the child, unsure of what to do. Then, without thinking, he whispered a calming word, something his mother had said to him when he was a child. It was a simple word, but as soon as it left his lips, the baby's cries slowed. Ethan blinked in surprise. The child stopped crying altogether and looked up at him with wide eyes. The queen looked at him, her expression a mixture of shock and relief. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling with wonder. "No one has ever been able to calm him like that." Ethan didn't know what to say. I don't know," he admitted. "I just said something. I've never." Before he could finish, the queen placed the baby back in her arms, gazing down at her child with a soft, loving expression. Then she turned to Ethan, her eyes intense, as though seeing him for the first time. "You have a gift, human," she said, her tone now calm but commanding. I've been searching for someone who could help me, and you have done something no one else could. This child, my son, is no ordinary being. He is destined for greatness, and his future needs a protector. I offer you a chance. Marry me, and I will give you everything you could ever want. My kingdom, my wealth, my people, all in exchange for your bond with my child. You will become the father of the future. Ethan's mind spun as he tried to process her words. Marry an alien queen? Become the father of a child destined for greatness? The offer was unbelievable. He had come here just to help fix a ship, not to be thrust into a galactic marriage proposal. He started, his voice faltering. I can't. I don't know. How to? You need not worry, she interrupted gently. See the uncertainty in your eyes? But this is not just an offer. It is fate. You have a connection with my child, something I cannot explain. You have the power to calm him when none else can. That alone proves you are the one I have been waiting for. Ethan took a step back, his heart racing. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had never been prepared for anything like this. Yet, there was something in the Queen's words, in the way she spoke, that made him question everything he knew. I can't just marry you because you say so, Ethan finally said. His voice filled with doubt. The Queen gave a small, knowing smile. I do not ask for love. I ask for loyalty and strength. And in return, I offer you a future unlike any other. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Ethan didn't know what to think. He had come here to fix a ship, but now he was faced with an offer that could change his life forever. Ethan stood there, trying to wrap his mind around what the alien queen had just said. Marry her? Become the father of her child? The idea felt impossible. He had come to fix a broken ship, not to become part of some strange intergalactic arrangement. I'm just a mechanic, Ethan finally said, his voice shaky. I'm not suited for this. I don't know how to lead a kingdom or be the father of a future ruler. Aaliyah the Queen didn't seem surprised by his hesitation. She studied him carefully, her purple eyes focused and calm. For a moment, there was silence in the room, the only sound being the soft breathing of her child in her arms. You do not need to be a king to be the protector, Aaliyah said, her voice gentle but firm. The child needs someone who can guide him, someone who can keep him safe. A father does not need to be born into a royal family to love a child. What matters is your strength of heart, your loyalty, and your ability to calm him when no one else can is proof enough. Ethan stared at her, still unsure. He had been trained to fix machines, not rule a kingdom. His life was simple, calm. He didn't need the responsibility of an alien queen or her people. But there was something about the way Aaliyah spoke, something about the way her child looked at him, that made him hesitate. What if she was right? What if this was some kind of fate that he couldn't ignore? The baby cooed softly, reaching its tiny hands toward him. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. He had never been one for children, but there was something about this alien child that made him feel protective. He took a slow step toward the Queen, his mind still racing. I can't just agree to something like this, Ethan said, his voice quiet. I don't even know you, and I don't know your people. How can I just become a part of your life like that? Leah smiled, her gaze softening. I understand your doubt, she said, her voice full of compassion. This is not a decision to be taken lightly, but think of it, human. You have already done something no one else could. You have calmed my son when his cries would not stop. You have the power to connect with him in a way that no other can. Ethan swallowed hard, couldn't deny that he felt something, a bond with the child that he couldn't explain. But the idea of marrying Aaliyah, of becoming part of her world, was overwhelming. He had never imagined his life would turn into something so... fantastical. What exactly would this mean? Ethan asked, his voice almost a whisper. What kind of life would I have if I agreed? Aaliyah's expression grew more serious. You would become a part of my people's future. My kingdom is at a crossroads, my child. Is the heir to the throne, but he cannot rule alone. He needs a protector, a father who will stand beside him. And that human is where you come in. You will not be a king, but you will be his guide, his strength. You will help raise him, teach him, and ensure his safety. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to digest her words. It was a lot to take in, more than he had ever imagined. He had spent his life working alone, focusing on mechanical problems, not on ruling anything or anyone. He was a simple man with simple desires. But this was no simple request. It was a chance to change the course of his life forever. And what about you? Ethan asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. What do you want from me, Aaliyah? Why offer me this, this bond? Aaliyah's expression softened even more, and for the first time, Ethan saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. I have watched many of my people fall, either by the hands of our enemies or due to their own weakness. My reign has been filled with challenges, and now, with my son's birth, I cannot afford to be weak. But I cannot raise him alone. I need someone strong. Beside me, someone who can stand by me, not as a king, but as a protector. Someone who understands what it means to fight for those you love. You have that strength, even if you do not see it. Ethan looked down at the baby who was now peacefully asleep in his mother's arms. The weight of the situation was starting to settle in. The alien queen was asking him to be something he had never imagined. Didn't know if he was ready for this, but there was a small part of him deep inside that felt it might be the right thing to do. The child needed protection, and the queen needed someone to help her lead. Aaliyah must have seen the uncertainty in his eyes, because she spoke again, her voice gentle but filled with conviction. I do not ask you to decide now, she said. Take time to think. The choice is yours. But know this, human. You have a connection with my son that no one else has. You calmed him. That is not something that happens by accident. The bond between father and child is special, no matter what world they come from. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind still racing. He needed time to think. He couldn't just make a decision like this on the spot. But as he looked at Aaliyah and then down at the baby, he felt the weight of the offer. It was an opportunity, an adventure, beyond anything he had ever dreamed of. But with that opportunity came responsibility. Could he handle it? I'll think about it, Ethan said finally, his voice firm but uncertain. I need to understand more. I need to know what this would mean for me and for you, Aaliyah. Aaliyah nodded, her gaze steady. Of course, human, take your time. But know this, no matter what you choose, you will always be welcome here. My son has already chosen you, whether you realize it or not. Ethan turned to leave, his mind in a whirl. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had just been turned upside down. Whatever choice he made, it would change everything. As he walked out of the room, the sound of the baby's soft breathing echoed in his ears. And in that moment, he realized that maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't as ordinary as he had once thought. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The strange offer from Aaliyah kept playing in his mind. Marry an alien queen? Become the father of a child destined for greatness? The thought felt like a dream, one that he couldn't wake up from, no matter how hard he tried. Tossed and turned in his small quarters on the space station. The low hum of the engines, the only sound in the still night. But the quiet was only in his head. In reality, his thoughts were anything but calm. As he lay there, he kept thinking about the baby Cavi. That small, alien child had already captured something inside of him, something he couldn't explain. The way the child had looked at him, trusting and curious, had made Ethan feel protective in a way he had never felt before. It was almost as if the baby knew Ethan, knew something deep inside him that he didn't fully understand. Ethan had never been one to follow fate or destiny. But now he was beginning to wonder if this was something beyond his control. Could it really be true? Could he be the one meant to protect this child? And what about Aaliyah? She was an alien queen, powerful and beautiful, yet she seemed so... vulnerable in a way. She had asked for his help, not just as a protector, but as a father figure to her son. The idea felt overwhelming. The next morning, Ethan decided to spend some time in the station's observation room. It was a quiet space, with large windows that allowed a perfect view of the stars. He sat there, staring out at the vast emptiness, trying to clear his head. The stars had always been a constant in his life. They were far, distant, and unchanged. But now, they felt different, like they were a reminder of how small his life had once been, and how big it was about to get. The door slid open behind him, and he turned to see Aaliyah standing there. She looked just as regal as before, her silver hair shining in the soft light. There was no crown on her head, no armor or weapons, just the queen, standing in front of him, human in her vulnerability. "I thought I might find you here," Aaliyah said, her voice gentle. "I've been thinking about our conversation." Ethan stood up, unsure of how to greet her. "I've been thinking too," Aaliyah smiled, but there was a sadness behind her eyes. "I understand your hesitation. This is a lot to ask. But I would not have asked it if I did not believe in you." Ethan shook his head. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I'm just a mechanic. I don't know how to be a father or a protector. I've spent my life working on machines, not ... people." Aaliyah stepped closer, her gaze steady and unwavering. "It is not machines that need saving, Ethan. It is lives. And you have already shown that you are capable of understanding that. The way you calmed Cavi, no one else could do that. There is something in you that understands more than you know." Ethan looked down at his hands, unsure of what to say. "I didn't do anything special. I just spoke to him." "Exactly," Aaliyah said softly. "You spoke to him and he listened. You did something no one else could. You showed him kindness and comfort, and that is what he needs. That is what he will always need." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He had never seen things that way before. He had always believed in fixing things, solving problems with tools and logic. But this wasn't like that. This was about something much deeper, something more intangible. He wasn't sure if he could do it, but he wasn't sure if he could walk away either. "What happens if I say no?" Ethan asked quietly. "What happens to Cavi? To you?" Aaliyah's face grew serious. "If you refuse, I will not force you. But without a protector, my son's future is uncertain. The kingdom will fall into chaos. The Varkar are already watching us, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Without strength, we will not survive." Ethan frowned. "The Varkar? They are a ruthless species. They seek to conquer us, to take what is mine. They know that Cavi is the heir, and they want him. They will stop at nothing to take him. From me?" Aaliyah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I cannot protect him alone." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. I'd heard rumors of the Varkara, fierce and dangerous species that had terrorized many planets in the galaxy. The thought of them targeting Cavia, a defenseless child, made his blood boil. And yet he still wasn't sure if he was ready to take on such a responsibility. He wasn't a soldier, a protector. He was just a man who had been fixing ships for a living. But as he looked into Aaliyah's eyes, he saw the weight of the world. On her shoulders, she wasn't just asking for help. She was asking for him to become part of something bigger than himself. She was asking for him to help save her people, her son, and her kingdom. "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan admitted. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Aaliyah took a step closer, her presence overwhelming but comforting at the same time. "You are stronger than you realize, Ethan. You've already shown it. You don't need to be a king. You don't need to be perfect. All I ask is that you stand with us, stand with me, and protect him." Ethan looked down at the floor, his mind racing. He had spent his whole life in the shadows, avoiding responsibility, staying out of the way. But now it seemed like the universe was pulling him toward something greater. He didn't know if he was ready for it, but he couldn't ignore the pull. After a long pause, Ethan finally looked up at Aaliyah. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll stand with you. I'll protect Cavi." Aaliyah's eyes softened, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "You do not know how much this means." For the first time since their meeting, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was something more now. And whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. The days following Ethan's decision felt like a blur. The station's once quiet halls now seemed to hum with the weight of his choice. He had agreed to stand by Aaliyah and protect her son, Kavi, but with that decision came new responsibilities. Ethan had never been a leader, never wanted to be anything more than a mechanic. Yet here he was, preparing for something far bigger than himself. The more time Ethan spent with Aaliyah, the more he learned about her people, the Zentari, and their long history. They were an ancient species, once spread across several planets, each with its own kingdom and traditions. But now their numbers had dwindled, and their future rested on the shoulders of Kavi, their heir. The Varkar threat was real, and if they could not unite and defend themselves, the Zentari people could be wiped out. Ethan's training was simple, but necessary. Aaliyah insisted that he learn about their culture, their history, and the strategies that had helped them survive for centuries. It was overwhelming at first, but with Aaliyah's patience and the guidance of her trusted advisors, Ethan slowly began to understand the complexities of the Zentari kingdom. However, the Varkar threat loomed larger each day. News came that a fleet of Varkar ships was on the move, heading toward their system. The Zentari were outnumbered, and even with the combined strength of their people, they didn't have the firepower to stand against the Varkar. They had no choice but to act quickly, and Aaliyah's plan was as bold as it was risky. We must strike. First, Aaliyah said one evening, as they gathered in a war room aboard the ship. The room was filled with maps of the galaxy, showing the Varkar's movements and the locations of Zentari strongholds. We cannot wait for them to reach us. If we do, it will be too late. We need to show them that we will fight, that we will protect what is ours. Ethan listened closely, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been involved in a battle before, let alone the defense of an entire kingdom. The weight of his new role was becoming more real by the minute. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of something far bigger. Aaliyah turned to him. Ethan, you must stand with me on the front lines. You will be Kavi's protector. Is your role? You must keep him safe at all costs. Ethan nodded, but inside he was uncertain. I'm not a soldier. I don't know how to fight. You have something the others do not, Aaliyah said firmly. You have the connection with Kavi. You have the ability to protect him in a way that no one else can. That is why you are here. Yeah. Decision had been made. Ethan had committed himself to the Zentari cause, and now he had to prepare for the battle ahead. But even as the preparations took shape, the weight of his decision settled heavily on his shoulders. He had never wanted to be part of a war. He had always preferred to keep to himself, to work on machines and avoid conflict. But now he was going to fight for a cause he didn't fully understand, and protect a child who wasn't even his own. Day of the battle arrived sooner than expected. The Zentari fleet was ready, and Aaliyah led the charge, her ship at the front of the fleet. Ethan stood beside her, watching as the other ships prepared for the upcoming fight. He felt nervous, his heart racing in his chest. The ship's interior was filled with the sound of soldiers preparing, their voices low but determined. Ethan had been given a simple uniform, a symbol of his new role, and a weapon, a small but effective energy rifle. Aaliyah had made sure to reassure him. Do not worry, she said, her voice calm. We will face this together. You will protect Kavi, and I will lead my people. Ethan nodded, but doubts still filled his mind. Could he really do this? Could he protect Kavi? Keep him safe from harm? What if he failed? As the fleet moved into position, Ethan could see the Varkar ships in the distance. They were massive, dark vessels that seemed to suck the light out of the space around them. Ethan's stomach tightened as he looked at them. He had heard stories of the Varkar, how ruthless they were, how they had destroyed entire civilizations without a second thought. Aaliyah's voice broke through his thoughts. We must be ready. The battle will be fierce, but we will not lose. For Kavi, for the Zentari. The first shot was fired from the Varkar ships. The battle began. Ethan's heart raced as explosions lit up the dark expanse of space. Ships moved in every direction, firing weapons and dodging incoming blasts. The sound of weapons firing was deafening, and the tension in the air was thick. Ethan kept his focus on Kavi, who was safely tucked in a special compartment near him. But his eyes kept darting to the chaos around them. It wasn't long before the first Varkar ship took direct hits from the Zentari fleet. Splintering. As the ship exploded in a massive fireball, the explosion rocked their own ship, and Ethan was thrown off balance. He grabbed onto the nearest wall, trying to steady himself. But as the ship steadied, he realized something important he wasn't. Afraid, the battle raged on, and Ethan found himself moving with purpose, helping the crew where he could. He didn't have the training that the soldiers did, but he had a sense of what needed to be done. And when Cavi's cries echoed through the ship, Ethan was the first to rush to his side. The baby needed him, and that was all that mattered. Hours passed, and the battle seemed endless. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Varkar fleet began to retreat. Their ships were damaged, and the Zentari fleet had held its ground. The day was theirs. As the dust settled, Aaliyah stood beside Ethan, her expression fierce but relieved. "We did it," she said, her voice steady. "We protected our people. Kavi's future is secure." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized. He'd been holding. He had done it. He had fought. And he had protected the child he had sworn to keep safe. The battle had been hard, and there were losses on both sides. But they had survived. And in that moment, Ethan realized something important. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of something bigger than himself, and he had found a purpose. As the fleet moved back to their base, Aaliyah placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are ready for what comes next, Ethan. You are ready to protect Kavi, and you are ready to stand by me." Ethan nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had found his place, and he knew now that he wasn't alone. He was part of a family, one that stretched across the stars, bound together by a shared purpose, and a bond that could not be broken. The days after the battle were filled with a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The Zentari fleet had won, but the victory had come at a high cost. The Varkar might have retreated, but everyone knew that they would be back. They had only just begun their assault on the Zentari kingdom. Their desire for control wouldn't be easily stopped. Ethan had never been part of a war before, and the weight of everything that had happened still felt heavy on his shoulders. He had protected Kavi, kept the child safe during the battle. But now, as he looked at Aaliyah and her people, he realized that the fight was far from over. Aaliyah had been busy in the command center of the ship, coordinating the efforts of her people, and ensuring that the fleet was ready for any follow-up attacks. She was the calm in the storm, her voice steady as she made decisions, her focus unshaken. But even the Queen could not hide the exhaustion that had settled into her eyes. Ethan had been helping where he could, but as the days passed, he began to feel the full weight of his new role. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was the protector of Kavi, the child who was destined to lead their people. And even though the Queen had asked him to stand by her, to help raise the future king, Ethan had begun to wonder if he was truly capable of what they needed from him. One evening, as the ship glided silently through space, Ethan found himself in the observation room once more, staring out at the stars. The quiet comforted him, even though it did little to ease the storm brewing inside his mind. He had made a promise to Aaliyah, to Kavi, but he wasn't sure if he could keep it. He wasn't sure if he was the right person to guide them through. What was to come? You seemed lost in thought. A voice broke through the silence. Ethan turned to see Aaliyah standing in the doorway, her presence commanding yet gentle, worrying about the future. Ethan smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, something like that. Aaliyah walked into the room, her silver hair flowing behind her like a stream of light. She paused beside him, looking out at the stars as well. For a moment they stood there in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. "You are not alone, Ethan," Aaliyah said softly. "I know this is hard. You never expected any of this, right? But you have already proven your worth. You are stronger than you think." Ethan shook his head. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm in over her. My head. I'm just a mechanic. I'm not a soldier, not a leader. How can I be the one to protect Kavi? How can I be the one to stand beside you when I don't even know if I can handle it?" Leah turned to face him, her eyes serious. "You do not need to be a soldier. You do not need to be a king. You only need to be true to yourself." Cavi will look to you for guidance, not because you have all the answers, but because you care. That is all that matters. You are already the protector he needs. Ethan looked at her, unsure of how to respond. What if I fail? He asked quietly. What if I can't protect him like you expect me to? Aaliyah reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. Failure is part of the journey, Ethan. We all make mistakes, but it is how we rise from them that defines us. You are already on the path that was meant for you. You have shown Cavi love and kindness, something that he will carry with him for the rest of his life. That is the most important thing. Ethan let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging. He had never been good at trusting himself, but Aaliyah's words gave him a small sense of hope. Maybe he wasn't meant to be perfect. Maybe he didn't have to have all the answers. All he needed to do was care, to be there for Cavi when the child needed him the most. As the days passed, Ethan found himself growing closer to Aaliyah and the people of the Zentari. He learned more about their history, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. The more he learned, the more he felt a part of something bigger than himself. The Zentari weren't just a group of alien species. They were a family, bound together by a shared belief in their strength and their future. Ethan also began to spend more time with Cavi. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about the child that made him feel at ease. Perhaps it was the bond they had formed. During the battle, Cavi seemed to recognize Ethan in a way that was almost comforting. The child's wide eyes would light up whenever Ethan was near, and though he couldn't understand what Cavi was thinking, the connection between them was undeniable. One evening, as Ethan sat in the nursery with Cavi, he couldn't help but smile as the child reached out toward him, his small hands grasping at the air. Ethan gently lifted him into his arms, holding him close as Cavi giggled, his tiny laugh filling the room. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest, and for the first time since he had arrived on the Zentari ship, he felt at peace. "You're going to be okay, Cavi," Ethan whispered, more to himself than to the child. "I'll make sure of it." Later that night, Aaliyah came to check on him. She smiled when she saw the two of them together, and for a brief moment, the weight of the universe seemed to lift from her shoulders. "He's lucky to have you," Aaliyah said, her voice quiet but filled with warmth. Ethan looked up at her, surprised by the sincerity in her words. "I'm lucky to be here," he replied. "I don't know how much I can do, but I'll try my best." Aaliyah nodded, her expression softening. "That is all I can ask." In that moment, Ethan realized that he had found something he hadn't expected: purpose. It wasn't about being a soldier, a king, or a perfect protector. It was about doing what he could, no matter how small it seemed. And for Cavi, for Aaliyah, and for the Zentari, that was enough. The days that followed seemed to blur together for Ethan. Life aboard the Zentari ship had become his new reality. There were still moments of doubt, still times when he questioned his decision to become part of this strange, powerful family. But as time passed, something inside him changed. The more time he spent with Aaliyah and Cavi, the more connected he felt to their world. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a protector, a part of something larger than he could have ever imagined. Aaliyah had given him a simple task that had turned into something far more meaningful. He was to train with the Zentari soldiers, learning their ways of defense, how to fight, how to survive in the chaos of battle. But it wasn't just about learning how to wield a weapon. It was about understanding what it meant to fight for something greater than yourself. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood what it meant to fight for someone else. It wasn't about glory or winning. It was about protecting those you cared about. He trained every day, pushing himself harder than he ever had before. At first, it was difficult. He wasn't used to the physical strain, the quick reflexes needed to survive in combat, but with each passing day, his body grew stronger. He learned the basics of combat, how to use the weapons the Zentari soldiers carried, how to defend himself and Cavi if the need ever arose. But even more than the training, it was his growing relationship with Cavi that changed him. The child, now just a few months old, had begun to recognize him. Every time Ethan entered the room, Kavi's eyes would light up, and he would reach for him. There was a bond between them, something unspoken, but undeniable. Ethan had become more than just a protector. He had become a father figure, someone Kavi looked to for comfort, for guidance. One evening, as they stood in the ship's observation room, Aaliyah joined Ethan, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. The battle with the Varkar had not been the end. The war had only just begun. The tension in the air was thick, and the silence between them was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Aaliyah had been busy, coordinating the Zentari fleet and preparing for whatever came next. But Ethan could see the exhaustion. In her eyes, she had been carrying the weight of her people's future for far too long, and it was starting to take a toll on her. "You've been working nonstop," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "You need rest." Aaliyah turned to him, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Rest. In times like these, rest feels like a luxury we cannot afford." Ethan frowned, his gaze softening. "You can't keep going like this, Aaliyah. You're only human." "Well, I guess, not really, but you know what I mean. You need time to recharge, or you won't be any good to your people." Aaliyah laughed lightly, a rare sound that seemed to lighten the mood. "Perhaps you are right, but I cannot afford to stop. My people need me. My son needs me." Ethan's heart clenched as he thought about Kavi. The child was still young, still too small to understand the danger that loomed over their heads. But one day Kavi would be the one to lead the Zentari, and Aaliyah, as his mother and protector, would need all the strength she could muster to guide him through the difficult years ahead. "You're not alone in this," Ethan said, his voice steady. "You've got me, and I'll keep Kavi safe. I'll help you lead. I'm not a king, and I'm not a soldier. But I know what it means to protect what matters most. And I'll stand by you, Aaliyah, no matter what comes next." Aaliyah studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "You don't know how much that means, Ethan. You have no idea how much I rely on you, how much Kavi relies on you." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell in his chest. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe. And he's like my own son now." Aaliyah's eyes glistened for a brief moment, but she quickly blinked away the emotion. "I never thought I would find someone like you, Ethan. A human, willing to fight for us, to fight for my son. You've become more than just a protector. Become part of our family." Ethan's heart skipped a beat at the word family. He hadn't realized it, but in the time he had spent with Aaliyah and Kavi, he had become something more than just a visitor in their world. He had become part of their future. The next few days were filled with preparation. The Varkar had not forgotten about the Zentari. They were gathering their forces, preparing for another attack. The Zentari fleet was ready, but they needed to be smart. They couldn't afford to face the Varkar head-on without a plan. Aaliyah had been working on a strategy that would catch the Varkar off guard, a way to hit them before they could strike again. Ethan had his doubts, but he trusted Aaliyah. She was a brilliant strategist, and her people had survived countless battles throughout history. This was just another fight in the long line of struggles they had faced. As the day of the next battle approached, Ethan spent more time with Kavi. He wanted to be sure the child knew he would always be there for him. He knew the time was coming when Kavi would need to be protected, when Ethan would need to stand as a shield between the child and the dangers of the galaxy, and no matter what happened, he would be ready. That evening, as the ship's alarms blared, signaling that the Varkar fleet had been spotted, Ethan stood by Aaliyah's side, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Aaliyah nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Ready, for Kavi, for my people, for our future." Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "Then let's make sure they don't have a future here." The battle had begun, and for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of certainty. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a protector, a father figure, and a leader. And he would fight with everything he had to ensure that Kavi, Aaliyah, and the Zentari would survive whatever the Varkar threw their way.